Well, good evening, everyone, and greetings. Welcome to all who are listening to the show tonight. It is a live show, and I've got some interesting and unusual stories to bring to your attention today. But before I do, I want to give a roll call of the world stock markets, because I believe that today was a turning point. It's not that the Dow Jones broke 10,000. That's not the issue. The issue is somebody has to ask yourselves, we have to ask ourselves, and I'm sure the question is more than being asked, why every stock exchange in the world went down, with some down, like Japan. The Nikkei 225 was down 554 points. Hong Kong Hang Seng Index was down 425 points. Mexico was down 251 points. Brazil, the Bovespa in Brazil was down 541 points. And we can go on and on and on, but Italy down 429 points, Russia down 333 points, Taiwan was down 215 points, and as you read the numbers that came out of Europe, it was obvious that Europe took a hit too. Now, for those of you that don't know, the stock market in the United States went down about 129 points, and it was down at one time period to about close to 200 points. Now, that in itself is no big deal, but what is a big deal is the fact that all of the current thinking and what most of us have been aware of over, let's say, 25, 30 years that we've been watching monetary markets and the actions of Federal Reserve, the actions of precious metals, something is not only rotten in Denmark, but every major capital of the world from the standpoint of what's going on in the financial realms. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it would be not too big of a leap or a jump to suggest that this is in anticipation of something that is on the horizon. And I'm talking now specifically terrorist-related, and I'll get to the meteor issues later and the comet issues if I have time. Second part of the show tonight, we're going to talk about clothing, because I don't think people understand what it's like or what may be in your future if you have to ultimately be either a refugee or someone who's running for their life. So we'll talk about the different clothing, and we're also going to talk about ballistic vests, known as bulletproof vests. It's getting closer and closer time when I believe those will be illegal for civilians not to have necessarily, but you won't be able to buy them. So we're going to talk first and foremost about what I believe is a cover story. A cover story is something that's out there to take away from the underlying truths of what may be the bigger picture. I'm going to talk about Tennessee. Now listen to this. This is a fascinating story. My take immediately on this is that we're seeing daily, I spoke about it last week, but now it's almost daily, that Israel's getting ready to go whack Iran's nuclear reactors. Not only that, but supposedly today, with congressional approval, President Bush is putting economic restrictions and trade sanctions on Syria. Not only is that happening, but Hezbollah has been warned that one more time of any more cross-border excursions, bombing and missile battery barrages, and guess what? Damascus is toast. For those of you that don't understand what the cutting edge of history is, you're living on it right now. And again, they may be out of beer in British Columbia and other places. Maybe that's why the natives are restless up there. But in the United States, we're out of common sense, and God grant it to us before it's too late. Now, I'm going to read this from Irwin, Tennessee. This was the Johnson City Press. 2 Israeli nationals held here without bond in the Unicoi County Jail will appear in Unicoi County General Sessions Court this morning. Sheriff Kent Harris said Sunday. Harris said the FBI ordered him to hold the duo without bond pending the investigation following a high-speed chase through a remote area of Unicoi County Saturday afternoon, in which the pair reportedly threw several items out of a rented Ryder truck, according to Sheriff Harris. I'm quoting him now. They ignored my blue lights for 2.5 miles, and they were traveling 20 miles an hour over the posted speed limits, he said. One man's passport had expired, and the other had a fake identification card, the sheriff said. By Sunday morning, Harris had identified the men who refused to give his first name as Almalayak Naor, who was the company of Shanuel Darren, 22, both from Israel, living in Miami, Florida. Our investigation has revealed they were on their way to Boston, Massachusetts, Harris said. Also, now listen to this, everyone, also, a vial of an unknown substance appears to be some kind of an accelerant because when shaken, it becomes warm, he said. Sheriff Harris has enlisted Ed Herndon, their Homeland Security officer, and the Tennessee Highway Patrol to run preliminary tests, and the FBI has asked we package the vial up and send it to a crime lab, which we're in the process of doing. Combing, in other words, or going through the confiscated Ryder truck, produced an odor of a liquid on a side panel of some kind that we will also send to the lab, Harris said. Other than that, the truck was clean, he said. Harris said his department worked through the night on Saturday, positively identifying Naylor and working with Interpol officials who late last night told the sheriff the two were not on any international warrant list. Harris said the men entered the United States from Israel in January. It was not known what type of visas they were granted. Harris said Naylor told FBI agents he was carrying a fake ID card to get into clubs in Miami. Keep in mind the guy's 22. The sheriff declined to answer other questions concerning the investigation that is ongoing. Records at Unicoi County Jail indicated Naylor and Darin will face charges today on counts of criminal impersonation, reckless driving, lying to authorities about throwing items out the truck, which they rented a short distance away in Mars Hill, North Carolina. Harris said the men told authorities they were moving furniture. Right, empty truck. Following their arrest Saturday afternoon, the sheriff said he had a sick feeling when he found a Learn to Fly brochure in the truck, especially since the county is home to the Nuclear Fuel Services Plant not far from downtown Irwin. Now I want to say this. I want to read this paragraph again because we're going to go after this story to all of the refinery fires that have taken place within the last 60, 80 days. You're going to see something here. Following their arrest Saturday afternoon, the sheriff said he had a sick feeling when he found a Learn to Fly brochure in the truck, especially since the county is home to the Nuclear Fuel Services Plant not far from downtown Irwin. This is still a very suspicious case, Harris said Sunday, as he reiterated the comment he made Saturday concerning the matter. We're living in a very different time. We all need to be vigilant when it comes to Homeland Security. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, false IDs, no big deal. Chemicals, and I want to know what the chemicals were. We were on a conference call last night, all of the analysts at Northeast Intelligence Network, Doug Hagman and myself, late into the night. And I said, obviously, it appeared that it was a binary substance, and I said, it's going to be fascinating to see if they'll ever tell us what was in that. During our conference call, we started to postulate, obviously, what the best target would be. Since they were going too fast on a county road, it seems like, obviously, they were taking the back roads. And by the way, that's the thing that first got the sheriff his attention, is that why is a Ryder truck taking all the backwoods roads in Tennessee? So it's amazing to me that this is a huge story, and anybody's welcome to email me. I'm not sure that Fox running the mainstream carried it all. Okay, now listen to this. I'm going to read you a roster of all the refinery fires and chemical fires that took place in February and March. And you tell me if this is, this happened, this sort of thing happens all the time. Those who've done their homework tell me that these 10 that have taken place in 2 months surpass the previous 15 years of refinery fires in the United States. February 1st, 2004, ConocoPhillips, the Wood River Refinery in Roxana, Illinois. February 2004, actually the 20th, to the Tesoro, California refinery fire in Tesoro Petroleum Corporation, Martinez, California. March 9th, Marathon Ashland Garyville refinery fire, Marathon Ashland Petroleum, Garyville, Louisiana. March 2004, Tuesday, the 23rd. Subduing Oklahoma refinery fire, Sunoco, Sun Oil Company, Tulsa, Oklahoma. March 27th, Rosemount refinery fire, Flint Hills Resources, Rosemount, Minnesota. March 30th, explosion, Texas City refinery, British Petroleum, Texas City, Texas. April 1st, Thursday, ExxonMobil chemical plant fire, ExxonMobil Corporation, Baytown, Texas. And on the 9th of April, the refinery explosion, Gallup, New Mexico, Giant Industries Refinery, Gallup, New Mexico. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I maintain, and I think it's obvious that these are not just circumstantial or happenstance fires and explosions. It's fascinating to me that one of my listeners, Dawn, sent me a dream that his daughter had. Now, I want you to know, she's never heard me talk about this. Her dad had to clue her in, but he said, Steve, my youngest daughter, Katie, related a dream she had last week. Now listen to this. This is a 20-year-old young lady. All the gas stations in sight were on fire. Wow, she looked as shocked as I was in hearing this after telling her that you told her the same dream vision on the Q-Files broadcast. The Trojan horse must be ready to open on us soon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's where we're at. It appears that so much stuff is getting ready to happen that simply it's all going to go at once. And by that, I mean, if you look at the gas prices, even with Saudi Arabia saying they might pump 1.5 million more barrels of gas a day, the point is that's not going to take place until June. And we now have President Bush, taking some pretty serious hits in the polls. And this whole scandal with the Iraqi prisoners, I got to tell you something. This is textbook, you guys. I don't doubt one bit that some of those pictures and a lot of those pictures are real. But you've got to ask yourself this. Who would generate those pictures and to what purpose? Again, when you hear that General A didn't know what General B was doing and General C didn't know what General D was doing, and the military saying that they had no training in this, and yet they had a lot of civilian contractors read intelligence agents over there. This is absolutely the most incredibly scripted and theatrically produced. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying those things really happen. But look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that given the tenuous situation in the Middle East, that someone is trying to not only cause World War III, but present World War III on a silver platter. And if you want to call it World War III or World War IV, I don't care. The bottom line is that this is absolutely scripted. Now, let me ask you this. All these bleeding hearts, and when I say bleeding hearts, I believe torture is wrong. End of story. Now, let me share this with you, too. As I look at the spiritual implications of that prison, it's got to be obvious to all of you that if that's where Saddam has tortured, and the torture and all the death that's gone on in that place, and then you add it into what's gone on under, our taking of the facilities, I believe it's supernatural, I believe it's demonic, and I believe it's the appetite of demons to destroy the image of God in man. And I got to tell you something. I still find it an unjust measure that when the 4 civilian contractors, and actually it was more like 8, were burned alive, mutilated, body parts hung from bridges and cranes, and then the stories coming out of what U.S. servicemen have had done to them, being gutted like fish and everything else, I think that it is absolutely obvious that the world is in the process of its transformation to bring it into a place of total chaos. The word chaos is probably as good as any other word because we are seeing the New World Order boys now initiate an institute. And I got to say this, I have never seen such a pathetic defense of the truth as coming out of the people, the talking heads in Washington. Again, look, the deal is that if you've got the Secretary of Defense and he knew about this stuff, then he's actually, the buck stops with him. But the point is that you also have military generals over there, I assume. I mean, I see so many stars sometimes on Fox, I think that the background music should be Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I'm not belittling those who have achieved that accomplishment, but I'm just telling you, I'm amazed and absolutely infuriated by the lack of communication skills. Now, either this, those people don't know how to talk, or they've been told they can't talk. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, literally in Texas and at the White House, I cannot believe that there hasn't been a more, how should I say this, present reality investigation into who really showed up down there. In other words, look, most people, even military guys, don't know, that torturing and the different techniques of torturing are obviously being used. And why do you torture low-level guys? You've got to ask yourself that, ladies and gentlemen. Most of these guys in there are obviously criminals, probably murderers, terrorists and everything, but some of them are also very low level. And I want to share with you the sexual nature of torture is also a fallback to the demonic. It's amazing and quite confrontational to me that we do not see what is so obvious to us. Forgive me, that should be obvious to us and obviously escapes us. Now, I want you to know that, we're seeing right now biblical events transpiring that you cannot just try to understand in the natural. One of my friends who's probably, in my opinion, the guy that I've met that I track with so well, he's ex-military, high-ranking ex-military, but he sent me a letter, and he said this, Steve, I would strongly urge everyone who has never read a Bible to go out and buy one and read it. Those who are not spiritually prepared for the things that are about to come upon this earth may find their hearts stopping from fear. It will be made abundantly clear that the thing that my men have been fighting in the dark and underground will soon be in the light and above ground amongst men. These entities are moving and leaving their hiding places, which means they are preparing to show themselves. In the world of the occult, it's called The Gathering. Some of you that used to watch, one of the TV series, I forget it, I can't think of it right now, but they always talked about The Gathering. And this is what's taking place. Now, listen, we know that when the enemy comes in, the Spirit of the Lord raises up a standard against it. Some people read it that the enemy comes in like a flood. That's not what it means. It says when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord raises up a standard against it. So the thing is that God is still looking for people who, like Nehemiah, and who, like the prophets and the different intercessors from Moses all the way through, will intercede for the people of God who just don't have an idea of what's getting ready to happen right now. So here's what I want to go back and I want to kind of touch on and bring these things together. The supernatural nature of the battle is obviously being directed and choreographed, scripted by a supernatural genius who has had umpteen thousands and thousands of years to figure out how to basically mess with mankind. Now, it's true and so obvious when Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, because these guys who are out there are seeking money. Look, when you hear of Halliburton and all these different things going on, and whether the war is over oil, of course it is, weapons of mass destruction, blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is money. The bottom line is money. And so, as the whole world lies in the evil one, its monetary systems also are under the scrutiny and direction of a supernatural intelligence. This is why I tell people, God is very clear that we cannot fight this in our physical strength. For he says in 1 Corinthians that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. That's in that realm. David didn't just quote the prophets when he took on Goliath. He had a sling that he was familiar with, and that in his familiarity had been tested prior to Goliath on a bear and a lion. Now, I want to tell you something. For those of you that are hunters, even going up against a good-sized bear with an adequate rifle, it's a thrill. But can you imagine a little guy out there worshiping God, loving God, and he goes up against a giant of a man, and basically with his sling in hand. But it wasn't that Goliath was a giant that got David's blood boiling, so to speak, or the fact that he was a guy that, just hung out with a bunch of sheep as a shepherd who would one day be king of Israel. The bottom line is he was jealous for the Lord God of heaven. That's one thing that the Christians have failed, and when I say Christians have failed, to recognize that we really do have an edict, we have a commandment, that when the Lord says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before thee," the point is that there are so many little gods, little g's, little demons out there that most people just will not confront or are unaware of the fact that they have to confront it. So when I get a letter from a friend of mine who was in, let's just say this, special operations, and he's telling me that the things they used to go and basically take out and take out, he's talking about things in underground, he's talking about all the things that nightmares are made of, and he says they're leaving their places. And by the way, just so you know, 90% of special operations aren't involved with foreigners and stuff. They're involved with what we would call preternatural, not only events and entities, that's a good word, non-human intelligences, but some pretty radically how should I say this, radically transformed species. Again, when I talk about this stuff, it's almost like I know that I can only go so far, because if I go any further, I'll lose too many of you listening thinking, "Oh man, what's he talking about?" But again, what I'm trying to share with you is this, that we are seeing now the invisible becoming visible. It's true of the meteors, it's true of the comets, it's true of the asteroids. It's one thing to go back and read ancient history and find out that the ancients were absolutely terrified of what they believed was heaven's judgment, and to live through the terror of that. It's another thing to start to experience it yourself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I posted on my website I think we posted on Thursday, maybe Friday, we were posting the three different heavenly bodies, if you'll call them that, comets, meteors, asteroids. And I'm not talking about one, I'm talking about three. We're talking about three different events. Now, I don't know the time that this is to take place yet. I am trying by the grace of God. But I put under the picture of the meteorite, I said, it's headed our way. What the world's governments are preparing for but aren't broadcasting. Projected impacts from multiple sources, not confirmed. They already know that the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic, the Western Pacific Ocean, and Siberia, based on the three they understand. But a friend of mine was talking about, and the guy was a scientist, he said, Steve, don't forget, he said, just imagine like what happens on a billiard table or pool table when you rack up the balls and you hit it at different angles. He says you get deflection of those balls. So the point is that he said, watch the moon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can look out on any moonlit night and see that the moon has been barraged with impacts. You look at the craters of the moon, and there's plenty of impacts there to remind you. And then, as I was posting this, or actually I didn't post, I asked Holly, my webmaster, posted, and she graciously put it up, is that the thing that's interesting and provocative to me is that I get my information from totally different sources than Mark Hazelwood or Jim McCanney or any of these other guys, okay? Again, I want you to know the theme may be the same, or there are parts of what information they have that are the same, But what I'm saying is my information doesn't come from there first and foremost. All it does is, look, it's evidence, you put it out there. The fascinating and alluring objects out there that are coming at us have a tendency to take this out of the realm of man and put it more into the realm of God. And so what was strange to me is over the weekend, Drudge Report was carrying a statement by Al Franken, the guy, that supposedly was going to start his new radio program, but they ran out of money. I guess they must have had a nice lunch someplace. But he said that President Bush was more concerned with meteors than he was with terrorism. Now, where do you think that information came from? That information had to have come through Democratic sources that were probably in the know in the Clinton administration, or that were still leftovers from the Clinton administration. Someone had to have tipped him off. Now someone say, oh, he's just being a wise guy. Well, that may have been he's being a wise guy, but I think it was very telling. Remember the stories that Russia actually had billboards, or the equivalent of billboards, showing the incoming astral bodies? When I say astral, I don't mean like astral projection. Heavenly bodies, meteors and asteroids coming in. And remember the rush to get the secret cities built, especially the Yamanatu mountain complex in the Urals. So the point is that I received an email from someone saying, do you, and this is a fair email because the answer is obvious, do you think that we will ever be told in time when these events are right on us? And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You may hear of the bureaucrats heading to the bunkers, but you and I and the average person outside the grace of God will not be told what is going to happen, when it's going to be happening. Now, I want to read to you out of Revelation 8:7 through 12. Again, it's fascinating to me and absolutely striking that John on the island of Patmos, writing about a time in the future, the things which will be, that he absolutely had an amazing vision of the end times. And so I'm reading from Revelation 8:7 through 12. Now the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down upon the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea turned into blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers, and on the springs of water. The name of that star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark, and a third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Now, it sounds to me, everyone, like we're talking about something very, very striking. Notice the first three are on earth, but the last, or the fourth angel sounding, the sun gets struck, and we watched Shoemaker Levy hit Jupiter, and now we're watching, when the United States government will leave up the SOHO feeds, we see some pretty startling sized comets going into the sun and then emitting fabulously beautiful and horrendously gigantic coronal mass ejections. But again, the fourth angel, that'd be a great title for a book, The Fourth Angel. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark, a third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Ask yourself this, what size would it take to eclipse a third of the night sky?